اللهم ارحمنا فإنك بنا راحم، لا تعذبنا فأنت علينا قادر. اللهم التف بنا فيما جرى به المقادير إنك على كل شيء قدير. أما بعد، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Respected brothers and sisters in Islam, generally, in most cases, although with exceptions, when we hear the statement in quotation, body no be firewood, it is more often than not used to justify either a sin to be committed or a sin already committed. Undoubtedly, we are living in a time of sin, evil, and vice, an ungodly time, a time driven by lust, a world devoid and deprived of morals. However, all this notwithstanding, justifying a sin because of this is even a more greater sin than the actual sin that is being committed. يقول ابن عباس رضي الله عنه: يا صاحب الذنب لا تعمن آكبة ذنبك واعلم أن ما يتبع الذنب أعظم من الذنب. He is saying: فإن عدم استهيائك ممن على يمينك وممن على شمالك وأنت تقترف الذنب لا يكل عن الذنب، وإن ضحكك عند الذنب وأنت لا تدري ما الله صانع بك أعظم من الذنب، وإن فرحك بالذنب إذا ظفرت به أعظم من الذنب. To the end of the quotation. The important part of this quotation is, he said, remember, your attitude after the sin is worse than the sin itself. He said this fantasy and sense of accomplishment, rejoicing over the perpetrating of crime after committing it, is worse than the crime itself. So today I share with you some thought-provoking stories of individuals who are faced with temptation at its peak, and I think we can all relate with them. I'm optimistic that I can make positive message to myself and to my listeners. The first of them is the story of Sayidna Umar. While patrolling Medina one night, he overheard a woman repeating this couplet: تطاول هذا الليل واسود جانبه وأرقني ألا خليل ألاعبه فوالله لولا الله إني أراقبه لحرك من هذا السرير جوانبه ولكن تقوى الله أن ذا تسدني وحفظا لبعلي أن تنال مراده. She said, this night is getting very long and very dark because I do not have my partner to play with. By Allah, were it not for the fear of Allah and for modesty, then this bed will shake under me. This woman was so lonely that she was tempted to commit sin, but for the fear of Allah, Umar radiallahu anhu made some inquiries about her and was told that her husband is away fighting jihad for the sake of Allah. Umar sent a woman to stay with her and immediately sent for her husband to come back. He then asked his blessed daughter Hafsa radiallahu anha, that is the wife of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, kam aktharu ma tasbiru al-mar'a an zawjiha. Oh my daughter, how long can a woman bear to be away from her husband? She radiallahu anha said 5 to 6 months, and in some narration 4 months. Umar radiallahu anhu then set a time limit for the people on their campaign of 6 months. They will march for a month, stay there for 4 months, then take another month for the journey back. The second among the stories I would like to share with you is the story of Nabi Yusuf. We've all heard and obviously familiar with the story of how Nabi Yusuf was seduced by Imra'atul Aziz, that is the wife of Aziz. And you know, for a lady, a noble woman, to have come down to that ugly status of racing with her slave to the door to the point of tearing his shirt from behind, you can be sure of one thing, and that is the fact that she must have given the hint, done the giggle, buttered the eyelid, dangled the candy, and an array of all other preliminary aspects. But Nabiullah Yusuf was Yusuf. He resisted the temptation and did not perpetrate the vice with the justification that body no be firewood. Scholars gave more than 15 reasons why Nabiullah Yusuf should have perpetrated the sin. But he said, Ma'adallah, Allah forbid, Innahu Rabbi ahsana maswa, Innahu la yuflihu dhalimun. This is why the Prophet ﷺ, while enumerating as-sab'a alladhina yudhilluhumullahu fi dhilli yawma la dhilla illa dhillu, made mention of a man, that is رجل دعته امرأة ذات منصب وجمال فقال إني أخاف الله رب العالمين, and a man that was invited by a woman of beauty and status to vice, and he said, Allah forbid, I'm conscious of Allah, the Lord of the nation. I share with you another story which was made mention of by Ibn Kathir rahmatullahi alayhi under the verse إِنَّ الَّذِينَ اتَّقَوْا إِذَا مَسَّهُمْ طَائِفٌ مِّنَ الشَّيْطَانِ تَذَكَّرُوا فَإِذَا هُمْ مُبْصِرُونَ. He said, there is this boy who used to come to the masjid during the time of Sayidna Umar and say his prayer, and on his way back after Salatul Isha, he used to visit his dad. But as he used to pass by, there is this beautiful lady who lives in that street, and this girl used to invite him and seduce him and entice him, and the boy used to constantly refuse and say, this is not correct, this is forbidden. But again, he is still a human, and when the provocation from the girl continues, at some point the boy could not resist and he succumbed. After praying his Isha, he went in to meet her, but there was a clash of emotion. Immediately the girl shut the door. He had a flash of this verse, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ اتَّقَوْا إِذَا مَسَّهُمْ طَائِفٌ مِّنَ الشَّيْطَانِ, to the end of the verse, and he collapsed, and the news broke out after he was taken to his dad. And upon regaining consciousness, his father asked him, my son, what really happened? He read the verse again, and he collapsed but could not be revived, and he passed out. After he was buried, in the morning, the incident was bounced off the Amirul Mu'mineen Umar. He said, take me to his grave, and he read this verse, وَلِمَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ جَنَّتَانِ, and for he who fears his Lord will have two gardens. I share with you the last story and wrap up. It is the story of the crying young boy. A young boy at the age of 16 or 17 named Sa'laba radiallahu anhu. He was one of the active, dedicated and committed youth during the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He sacrificed almost everything to reach Jannah. One day, the Prophet ﷺ sent him on an errand which would have taken him few hours to complete. He went on the errand, and on his way back to Medina, he passed by a small village which was built of small tents, and in one of the tents he heard the sound of water being split inside as if someone is having a shower. Temptation played up a bit here, and he opened a tiny crack in that tent, looked inside, and was surprised to see a naked woman taking her bath. Shaitan started playing with his mind to look more, since the area is quiet and isolated and nobody can see him. He had a flash of the prophetic hadith which says the first gaze is for you, and the second and anything above that is against you. He was gripped at this point with remorse, regret and sorrow. He immediately closed the tent, shouting at the top of his voice, La ilaha illallah, I will never go back to the Prophet, because Allah will surely reveal a verse about me. He ran out of the city, and the Prophet and his Sahaba kept searching for him for weeks. To cut the story short, he was found and returned back to the Prophet, but stayed for few days and died after that. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Why we perused pornography sites day and night, living very comfortable. In fact, the two reasons that could stop some people from visiting the site in a day is either they don't have sub, or either their phone battery is flat. Ruhmaka ruhmaka ya Rabbana. The author of Nuniyat al-Qahtaniya is saying, وَإِذَا خَلَوْتَ بِرِيبَةٍ فِي ظُلْمَةٍ وَالنَّفْسُ دَاعِيَةٌ إِلَى الطُّغْيَانِ فَاسْتَحْيِ مِنْ نَظَرِ الْإِلَهِ وَكُلَّهَا إِنَّ الَّذِي خَلَقَ الظَّلَامَ يَرَانِ. When you are in a moment of seclusion and isolation and your ego is provoking you to perpetrate a sin, then show some regard to the gaze of Allah while telling your ego that Inna alladhi khalaqa dhalama yarani, that is the creator of the darkness is seeing me. With all sense of respect to the women of our time, the women back then were much more beautiful. There was nothing like Mary Kay powder, no foundation powder. They were much more endowed with natural figure eights, as you guys will say, not artificial and some sort of plastic surgeries we have these days. Let me not go into detail anyway. But our pious predecessors tried resisting them, and if they happen to fall into the temptation, they don't end up justifying why they have to fall, but they are always gripped with remorse, guilt and regret. The ideal thing is we should not commit the sin, but you and I are human and we commit sin every now and then. At least if you must commit it, please don't justify it. Remember, لا خير في لذة ما بعدها النار. There is no good in a pleasure, the aftermath of which is fire. راقب الأواكب تسلم لا تمل مع الهوى فتندم أين لذة المعصية وأين تعب الطاعة. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Tahrim is saying, يا أيها الذين آمنوا قوا أنفسكم وأهليكم نارا وقودها الناس والحجارة, to the end of the verse. O you who believe, ward off yourselves and your families against a fire whose fuel is men and stone. So next time you hear them saying, in quotation, body no be firewood, then tell them in quotation also, but if you become firewood on the day of resurrection, if you use them commit sin for this world. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.